The founders, three of them, Moses McNeill, his brother Peter, and Peter Campbell were actually from the Gairloch area, from Gairloch Head and Roseneath, and their fellow founder, William McBeath, was from the town of Callander. Now, the four boys came into Glasgow, as many thousands did at the time due to the Industrial Revolution, looking for employment, coming from the countryside of Scotland. They came into Glasgow and they were to meet in a close, they were all living in Cleveland Street in the West End of Glasgow. But they all had a keen interest in sporting pursuits. In Glasgow Green, where we are today, was the city's wide open space that was used for all sporting pursuits back then, and also as an escape from industrial smog that would engulf the city. We know the founders were very keen on the sport of rowing back in Gairloch Head, and referring to Willie Dunlop's wonderful article that was written for the SFA handbook, Willie hints heavily in that they actually had their own rowing club, and that it was this they turned to in an effort to keep fit if they were injured. So they very much kept alive the love of rowing when they came into Glasgow. Peter McNeill would travel on a Saturday morning across town from the family home in Berkeley Street to here at Fleshers Hall. Fleshers Hall was arisen on the outskirts of Glasgow Green, and he put poles in the ground that would act as goal posts and then literally stand guard until the hour came. And this is quoting William word for word, until the hour came in the afternoon when he'd be joined by his friends and his teammates. So Peter took it upon himself, and that must have been quite a daunting task back then for a teenager to stand in this spot just to ensure that Rangers was somewhere decent to play those first few matches. Well, the first game was against Callander. Incredibly, that first match was to end 0-0. Also here at Fleshers Hall later that season, Rangers were to play Clyde, which was a game that should have won 11-0, and that game saw Rangers wear the blue jersey for the first time. Then Rangers moved to the West End, where the boys had settled to Burnbank, and we took up a lease there till 1875, and then we moved south of the river for the first time to Kinning Park. It was then we made the move along to Ibrox for the first time. So Rangers led very much a nomadic existence in the first few years, but it was all to start here at Fleshers Hall. When the new Sportive Association first came into the city, there was a lot of clubs formed, but there was a lot of clubs went to the wall very quickly. And that was what's fascinating more than anything else about the boys who formed Rangers. These guys all had jobs at the time, but they were coming down here and went at Burnbank and at Kinning Park and training 6 nights a week just to improve their skills, just to ensure that Rangers kept moving forward. It wasn't enough for these guys just to be competing. They wanted to be the best version of themselves that they possibly could, and we believe it's been that dedication and hard work that kept Rangers moving forward. We believe, and due to recent research, well, we know for a fact now, due to a newspaper article, that Rangers were called Western during one point during our first year, because we found a newspaper report that said Rangers and in brackets late Western, and they were playing the Rovers at the time. So we may well have played other names during that first year. But in the spring of 1873, a vote was taken, a meeting was held, a vote was taken, and then the name Rangers was adopted. Moses was a name that's recognised by most people when talking about our founders, you know, because he's also what we would call today a winger in the football team. He was there for 10 years, but he then moved into the administration of the club, and then kind of drifted from Rangers into business. We pick him up in a couple of census records around about Glasgow. Then he kind of disappeared, and he retired back to the Roseneath area from where he'd been born and bred, and that was where he used to spend his final days. Now, Moses' brother Peter is one of the most fascinating characters amongst our founders, in that Peter went into business with his brother Harry, and it was what we know as H&P McNeill's. It was a sports outfitters. They were based in Union Street, Redfield Street in Glasgow. Sadly, by 1896, their business was failing so badly that it disappeared from the PO directory, and this was to take a tragic toll on Peter's state of mind, so much so that it saw him admitted to Hawkhead Asylum, which today is Leverdale Hospital. And sadly, Peter passed away there in 1901. But again, he lived long enough to see the club from Fleshers Hall into Ibrox Stadium. Many years later, during the research for the Gallant Pioneers book, done by Gary Ralston initially, and then we helped Gary in later years, Gary managed to locate two of Peter McNeill's granddaughters, and one of them, Heather, unveiled the plaque that we have today across in the Glasgow Green Football Centre in commemoration, of course, not only her grandfather, but of the formation of Rangers Football Club. The other founder was Peter Campbell. Peter Campbell again was from Gairlochhead. His family were involved in the shipping industry. Peter was a player that was described as very much being ahead of his time. He actually went to Blackburn Rovers for a spell. He spent a season there. But he returned to Glasgow, but then followed in the famous tradition of going to sea. But tragically, in the early weeks of 1883, his ship, the St Columba, floundered in the Bay of Biscay off the coast of France, and Peter died aged only 25. Sadly, he didn't see what had been born here in Fleshers Hall growing into that worldwide institution. But we placed a plaque through our Restoration of Rangers Graves project. We placed a plaque commemorating Peter Campbell's contribution at Penarth Pier in South Wales a few years ago, to highlight again the contribution that he'd made. And the fourth founder, as I said, William McBeath, was from the town of Callander. Willie again had a tragic life, but I suppose the highlight of Willie's career would have been that he was voted in as president of the club when only 17 years of age, which was quite incredible to think back in it now, taking up that position of responsibility. Willie played in the first match here against Callander, which ended 0-0, again referring back to that article by William Dunlop. Willie said that Willie McBeath was given man of the match, but then he spent a week in bed recovering due to his exertion, so he must have been pretty much full on. Again, William drifted from the football club and went south and got involved in a couple of businesses which were sadly to fail, and this saw him spending his last days in Lincoln, in and out of a workhouse where he was to sadly die in 1917. William McBeath was sadly buried in a pauper's grave. There was no one there to actually claim him. But again, through his research, Gary Ralston managed to locate the unmarked grave of William McBeath, and since then a group of fellow Rangers supporters raised funds and placed a stone on William McBeath's grave. So that is the story of the four founders. They were all here as kids and kept pushing to make sure Rangers kept moving forward. But sadly, a couple of them lost their lives early.